John Penrose is Weston's local MP, with a career starting out in business and publishing before turning to politics in 2005. Before achieving his role of Tourism and Heritage Minister, he worked as a business minister in 2009. Hello John, thank you for joining us today.
Delighted.
What made you get into politics?
I was a late starter in politics because, some people start when they were at school and university, and I didn't do any of that sort of stuff. I got involved with raising money for charity when there were famines in the Horn of Africa and that sort of stuff, so I didn't really get into politics until I was in my 20s. But really, it was because I was one of these people who always got annoyed when the government did stuff wrong, and I used to sort of, yell at the telly and get annoyed when the radio was on and the news was on. And in the end, I think my friends got fed up with me ranting and said, look, for God's sake, shut up or do something about it. So I thought I'd join a party and see if I could make a difference.
You're Weston's local MP. What does that role consist of?
A lot of stuff. On a regular basis, pretty much every week, I have a surgery. So that's when individuals come to me and say, I've got a real problem with whatever it may be, the child support agency or a noisy neighbour or almost anything really. So that's a regular thing. That can be really satisfying when you can help someone, even in a small way, just with something that's been completely ruining their life. But also it involves sticking up for Weston in Parliament, so making sure that the people of Weston have got an active voice in Parliament and someone who's really sticking up for them, making their voice heard in Westminster.
You're also Weston's local Tourism and Heritage Minister. Do the two work well together?
Everyone always says that there's no HR, human resources department in politics, there's no personnel department, but actually whoever offered me the chance to be tourism minister, I think was doing a great job, because obviously seaside town, tourism is a really big industry here, as everybody knows. So it's a great opportunity to sort of kill two birds with one stone, as far as I'm concerned.
How often do you get to attend the House of Commons, and have you ever mentioned Weston?
Like every MP, I'm in Westminster. You have to be there from sort of Monday to Thursday, otherwise the government might lose votes, and the government could potentially fall if enough of us stayed away. So yes, I'm there every week. I took part in a couple of debates in the course of the last week. I mentioned Westminster. Some of my colleagues would say with boring regularity, because I'm biased about Weston. I think it's great. So I tend to use it as an example about things that work or are not working in the tourism industry, for example. In the past, when we were in opposition, when Tony Blair was Prime Minister and when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, I've been asking questions of the government, trying to make sure that they're doing the right thing for local people here in Weston, and I keep on doing that now.
What kind of responses did you get?
I find it depends on how you ask the question. It's quite interesting, and it depends who you're asking too. When Blair was Prime Minister, for example, I asked him a question about local dentistry, because we had a real problem with NHS dentists in Weston at the time, and they weren't getting the right amount of money, and there was a big snarl up basically. And I found with Blair that if you ask him a question in a way which is not trying to be clever, not trying to be partisan or party political, but just saying, look, there's a big local issue, put party aside for a second, can you help? He responded quite well. Try and be clever, and he'd sort of try and chop you off at the knees in return, and he'd sort of send it back with interest. Depends on the minister you're asking and how you ask them. I generally find that if you try and play it straight and say, look, this is a genuine local issue, help, most ministers, no matter which party they're part of, will try and come up.
What does a Conservative future look like? Are there many changes?
I think there's got to be some changes. I mean, the problem is we can't carry on the way we were. We can't carry on spending money which we don't have. So we've got to make sure that we are cutting our cloth to fit and we are living within our means. We've got to make sure that we balance the budget just the same as any family does, because if you carry on borrowing money from the bank, at some point you're going to get the bailiffs knocking on your door. So we've got to make that basic change. Once we've done that, then I think we can start to try to build a better future for the country. And there's an awful lot that needs to be changed as well. We need to make sure, for example, that it always pays to work, that people have got the right skills to work, that people have got the right training, and then they've got the right incentives. And at the moment, if you are unlucky enough to be out of work for any reason, the benefit system in this country is appallingly complicated. You need a PhD to understand the thing, and that means that it's really hard to have the incentives to know if you're going to be better off taking a job versus not taking a job. Many people do the right thing, but we're making it really hard for them.
The press normally focuses and highlights on the negative side of the Conservative policies. What are some more positive ones?
Helping people get into work and helping them get the dignity and respect that work will bring, as opposed to having to be dependent on handouts and benefits. That I think is a really positive policy and a really important one. I think also some of the stuff we're trying to do about rebuilding British local communities and recreating cohesive local communities, giving local communities back more power, I think that's really positive, because what's been happening progressively, and this is governments of all stripes, this isn't a party political point at all, but what's been happening over the last 20 or 30 years in Britain is Westminster and even Brussels have been sort of grabbing more and more power to themselves, and they've been taking it away from you and me as local citizens. What we want to do is to hand that back and say, actually, Westminster doesn't know best, what Brussels certainly doesn't know best. Local communities and individuals and your community and your local street knows best about what's right for each individual local area. And so therefore, take some of that power, hand it back, let local people get cracking on it. That's a really big change, and I think really positive.
The Tropicana has been something you've been working on since 2005. On one of your online articles, you wrote that every few months there's another flurry, a spasm of irritation or a way of despair, but no progress. Isn't that exactly what's happening with a Conservative council?
I think it's what's happened with every council for at least the last 10 years and quite possibly the last 20. And actually, the point about it is I don't think it makes any difference who's running the council. It goes wrong. And what I've done, in fact, each time it's gone wrong, and I think we've now had 3 or 4 different schemes that have fallen over for one reason or another. And what I've done is I've gone back to the developers behind each of the schemes and said, look, what was it? What sort of tripped you up? And it doesn't seem to matter, as I said, who's running the council. What they say is that the Tropicana site itself is quite tricky. I mean, commercially, it's a difficult site to make work. So I said, all right, why? And what they tell me is that swimming pools in general lose money. The only way you can make a swimming pool pay is you've got to have all sorts of other things wrapped around it. So you've got to have cafes and bars and all sorts of other shops and bits and pieces around it. They make money, they can subsidise the pool, and overall you then get something that works. The trouble with the Tropicana site is, comparatively it's quite small because it's got a certain footprint, certain size to it, and once you put the pool in the middle, you've got to get enough other stuff round the outside to create enough surplus to subsidise the pool, and it's only just big enough to do all that. Added to which, from a construction point of view, you've got to build something that's quite expensive to build because it gets walloped by the tide and the storms in the Bristol Channel twice a day. And that means that actually it's expensive to build what you need to do compared to if we were building it 2 blocks inland back from the seafront. And so take all that together, and what they say is when the economy's doing well, you can just about make the numbers add up. When the economy takes a dive, which it just has, and which it has in the past, then the numbers don't work, and that's why the thing tends to fall over. So my message to the council is, look, it doesn't actually matter whether or not the council is run by the Conservative Party or any other party. We've had all shades over the course of the last decade and a half, or whatever it is. We've got to, Weston is fed up with waiting. We've either got to build up the Tropicana or knock it down, because at the moment it's sitting there, it's rotting, it's dragging the whole seafront down. Get on with it, because we are fed up with waiting.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.